Good morning, everyone. It's Simon with the Morning Report. Today is and it is currently 7:32 a.m. Current temperature outside is about 94 degrees. High in 99, lows in 87. We're expecting rain later tonight, so expect a crappy bus ride home. Those who usually leave by air will be probably delayed. The PA will update throughout the day with details on that situation. Malcolm is out today with illness. Turns out his big, creepy alien body has had a negative reaction to some of the bacteria in the air circulation down here. Dr. Jean thinks this is because of the exposure from taking tours of other levels of Area 51. What those tours are for, I don't rightly know, and I am not privy to that information. I hear we'll be getting some new hardware to actually get him talking next time, and I'm actually really excited for that. I have a bunch of questions I want to ask him. Anyway, I've got a weird, creepy little story for you all, but first I gotta get through these announcements. Trust me though, this one will make you squirm. All personnel were required to stop moving and pay attention for possible immediate response. A buzz will alert you to turn your radio's volume up. You know the drill. Alright, sea level is having problems with the air conditioning again. The temperature gauge keeps going from the mandatory 68 degrees up to about 85. They sent me at least 3 memos this morning complaining about this, so if maintenance could get down there, I would really appreciate it. They've stated that, quote, "It's not the sensor, it's something else." They made that kind of sound sinister. Anyways, maintenance should get down there ASAP. I'm pretty tired of getting these faxes. I-16's viewing glass is having trouble again. It seems the subject is intentionally fogging up the glass with heat to obscure the doctors and scientists from viewing it. Maintenance and engineering are scheduled to meet at 4:30 p.m. today to discuss plans on fixing the issue. It says here they're going to base the possible designs on I-12's dehumidifier. So there's something to get the boys in engineering stirred up with ideas. And Y-level requires a complete biological purge again. Physical decontamination, which I mean going in there, looks to be impossible. I guess Y-level will need a complete restaff again. I won't be able to read off all the deaths today from Y-level. There are just far too many. So, management has posted up a memo with everyone's name on it. They're up in every level's cafeteria if you want to, pay respect to a name. Lunch today is going to be chicken Alfredo. For vegetarians and vegans, there will be a choice of a meatless sauce. For a side, you'll have the choice of spicy green beans or coleslaw medley. The birthdays today include Gregor on A level. He is 43 years old today. Rico on T level, redacted years old. Carol on O level is redacted years old. Nora on K level is redacted years old as well. Okay, on to deaths. Dominic on A level, cause of death is test flight crash. Tuco on A level, cause of death is test flight crash. I'm sure everyone saw the smoke coming in for work this morning. The test flight last night didn't go very well, obviously. In a rare show of emotion, Marshal Quinn has stated that, quote, "With this line of work, it is unfortunately common for those working on experimental aircraft to face these kinds of disasters. It's especially hard when dealing with the deaths of those under classified aliases and classified objectives. We want to be very open in our mourning, but our duties deny any possibility of that happening. Nevertheless, I give my deepest sympathies to A level and all of those who have lost lives in our endeavors. It may seem fruitless at times, but with God's help we'll learn the secrets of the universe, or die trying." End quote. Pretty heavy sentiment. From Quinn, no less. Anyways. Bernard on G level. Cause of death is dismemberment. Yukon on S level. Cause of death is classified. Wesley on S level. Cause of death is classified. And that seems to be it for today. Again, Y level deaths will be put up in the cafeterias on all floors. Oh, I have some news as well. Volunteer staff members who are going to the refurbished Tokyo Black facility in, Tokyo, are required to attend the Majestic 12 seminar on traveling abroad in a classified capacity. Agents Knowles and Frida will be there to give on-hand instructions on what to do in a compromising situation. Oh, and those leaving need to sign a new confidentiality waiver before transferring. Tokyo Black is a Majestic facility, but Japan added a few details that applied to their laws and security mandates. Okay, Christ, that was a lot of depressing and mundane information. Now it's time to get to the story. Now, my listeners, this story comes straight from D-Level. You all know what D-Level is, right? Domestic diseases, infections, viruses, whatever. That means that these diseases, however the hell they are made, come from the Earth. They fall under 4 of the standard nucleobases. Now, this isn't our usual mess of paranormal oddities and unsettling strangeness. I mean, I get more declassified files from E-Level, which is alien diseases, infections, and yada yada yada. But this story is so weird and creepy, I thought it would fit great in the morning report. Now, the disease I want to talk about is important, but the real story comes from the characters who have to confront and react to the disease. And one of the big characters, like always, is actually the town itself. With many outbreaks, the biggest concern is the strain infecting a large population. Thankfully, with this particular strain, the outbreak happened in a smaller area. It's strange to think that what could have happened if history were different. What if this town were more populated? What if it had historical significance? What if it was some kind of a tourist trap? The town I'm speaking of is a small little dot in eastern Georgia, United States. This town is called Waynesboro. Now I can bet the air has already gone out of D-Level, because this particular incident didn't happen too long ago. It's fresh in everyone's minds. Usually I tell stories of the past, how mentalities back then were different, how everyone was scared of the Reds when they really should have been scared of... Well, I'm getting off track. This incident, the Waynesboro incident as it's called, took place on July 9th, 2010. Yeah, that recent. Waynesboro is a very traditional town by Georgia standards. Bird dog capital of the world, if that tells you anything. They have plenty of modernistic development, but you're still welcomed with dirt roads and horseflies meaner than Adolf Hitler. But the trademark of the town is the relentless southern heat that comes with these summer months. Georgia heat, it isn't like our Nevada heat. It's not dry. Instead, it's very wet, very humid. There's a gross, sticky wetness to it all. I guess I'm a bit biased, though, with my love of the Mojave, which holds me so dearly. This particular summer, a family of Dominicans were celebrating the return of their daughter from serving in Iraq. Their names were... I don't remember the names being blacked out when I received this file. That's weird. Oh, here's a note. Quote, "The family in question shall remain anonymous, despite the file being declassified." End quote. What? The point of a declassified file is that I get all the details, guys. What a crock of... Anyway, that's okay. I don't need the family name to tell you the story. All you need to know is that the daughter of the family, the woman I mentioned who had just returned from Iraq, was named Raquel. Raquel's family came from the Dominican Republic, but her and all her brothers were born in America. Her mother and father left Santo Domingo as high school sweethearts and married as soon as they were legitimate Americans 5 years later. The two had a fondness for all things American. The sports, the food, the history. You could consider them old school immigrants. People who bought into the idea of the U.S. as the land of the free and the home of the brave. And despite everything, they stayed that patriotic well into raising their kids. And well into the end. Raquel was taught in her family's ways like any child would be. Her influences at childhood were a good mix of both her mother and father's homeland and the patriotism of their new home. Cooking, tradition, and even the language of their old homeland were brought to bear the American label, as her father believed in the idea that America was the melting pot of numerous cultures. Raquel's family was pretty well known around town. Raquel's father worked at the nearby nuclear plant, and her mother was always doing volunteer work. Again, it's amazing what the containment staff at Majestic can do with a small time frame. I think that if this incident happened in a more populated area, we'd probably be unable to hide this terrifying disease from the general public. And with its horrificness, which I'll get to in a bit, we'd see panic on a global scale. Sorry. I guess I tend to embellish a bit when it comes to the stories I do on here. But I honestly feel that. If this were the apocalypse we would have, if this disease was the one to do it, I'd kill myself rather than face that future. Anyway. Oh, Raquel had 3 brothers. Their names are all blotted out too. Is Raquel the only one not redacted? Weird. Well, what is important about them is that they were all enlisted men. 1 Marines, 1 Navy, 1 Air Force. Raquel's father was very proud of his immigration into the United States, and he showed that by telling his children wondrous tales about the American way of life. So you get the sense that these children were eager to enlist as soon as they could. Raquel was no different. I have a DVD of Raquel's debriefing after the incident. After the initial incident debrief, she was asked to give some details about her life.
Go on.
My dad was scared at first. I mean, he liked the idea that his sons were ready to serve. But as soon as his daughter enlisted, he suddenly started being weird. Girls shouldn't be in the army. You're gonna get hurt. Blah, blah. He wasn't being sexist about it or anything. My dad was just really traditional. I thought he was being an ass, though. Being 18 years old, I knew everything, you know? Fuck you, Dad. You just don't understand me. I'm an adult. Anyway, when I got home from my first tour, Dad was overwhelmed. He wanted to have a big party, invite the whole family. Even Wallace's family.
Sorry, I should have mentioned. Wallace is Raquel's boyfriend. They met while in Iraq. Wallace was in the Rangers while Raquel was a tank mechanic. Despite being a mechanic, Raquel took her status in the Army very seriously. That meant as being as fighting fit as the ones out in the shit. The two trained a lot together, and Wallace saw potential in her talent and resolve. If I'm reading this right, she took the Rangers test and passed. I'm thinking Wallace must have put in some work to get her tested, because you need to have it listed in your contract that you want to be a Ranger. But it looks like the test was more of an indulgence than anything official on the Army's part. She was offered an advisory position, but Raquel declined. This must have been quite the shock for her, seeing as how the Rangers test is a weekly affair with multiple phases. She put in a lot of work. It sucks, but the belief is that she was held back from the Rangers for being a woman. Keep in mind, the change that women can operate in combat situations only started in 2013, so back in 2010, Raquel was still designated to other roles. She's asked about it here.
Was I mad about it? Yeah, I was. I mean, I'm not the boasting type, but I felt like I was as tough as any of those other boys in the Rangers, Wallace included. Wallace would be tripping right now if he was here. He was always into those conspiracy shows, like that one about aliens in ancient Egypt. What was it called? I don't know. You know, it's funny. It's not his smile or the way he kissed me that I miss. It's stupid shit like that.
If it sounds like Raquel seems a little distant from the events that have transpired, it's because she is. The doctors that examined her post-incident said she wasn't in shock. Her personality is just kind of blank. I looked into it a bit more, and there's a few hints about her disposition from her psych file while working as a tank mechanic. Here's a psychologist talking about her reaction to being ordered to cut a tank commander and a squad out of a tank that had been hit with an IED. Quote, Private Raquel, redacted, was issued an order to get on top of the Abrams and see if she could cut Staff Sergeant Kellogg and his men from out of the tank. It was most likely that everyone inside was dead, but the bodies had to be recovered for the families to mourn. The other mechanics hesitated, but Private Raquel was quick to answer the call. She started through the hatch, but then found it too difficult. She then went under, through the blast hole. While inside, she jokingly remarked, "If you guys want, I can cut them up, load them, and fire them off. A real military funeral." No one laughed. She was able to get the bodies out one by one, and for her actions she was promoted to private first class. But many of her colleagues were taken aback by her commentary. She was ordered to visit a military psychologist shortly after. End quote. So, you get the sense that Raquel isn't the type of person to get emotional or distraught about matters of life or death. This can be typical with men and women accustomed to combat, but Raquel was just a mechanic at the time. Now, I will say that she does seem a bit shaken at times when discussing what happened to her family during this particular incident I'm talking about. But the doctors would not classify it as PTSD or any kind of psychological damage. That's pretty crazy, because what I'm about to tell you would probably have me sobbing under my desk if it happened to me. On July 9th, the family was gathering at Raquel's father's house. The family lived out in the boonies a bit. Next-door neighbors were separated by miles of trees and plains. The group were planning on finally meeting Wallace's family, and they were all going to go to a local restaurant. Here's Raquel.
We used to have these kinds of big family gatherings, you know? Boys would be out back talking shit with some beers. Girls would be inside sipping tea or coffee and gossiping about who knows what. I was playing football with my brother's kids. Little was doing well in football this year. He was in middle school, so it didn't really matter, but his team had a good chance to go state, and he cared, so I cared. I noticed Wallace was looking at me strangely. He kept biting his lips, staring at me as I ran around with the kids. I didn't think anything was wrong at first. I thought he was just... well, I thought he wanted to fool around. We didn't have time, though, because we were about to meet his family down at...
So, the group heads to the restaurant. The restaurant is mostly empty. Some new corporate places opened up further in town, and the independence joints weren't seeing as much business. There was an old couple there, the owner, and 2 cooks. The place was a barbecue joint, but most of the interior details I have about the restaurant have been redacted for security reasons. All through dinner, Wallace is acting weird. He keeps biting his lips and even starts to gnaw on his own fingertips. That's when Raquel confronts him on it.
After a while, I asked Wallace what was up. We went to the bathroom together, and he began to chew on his index finger. He was still he could still talk at this point. He told me he didn't know what it was, but there was, this itch on his finger. He couldn't scratch it. He couldn't relieve it. He said it felt internal or something bugging him under the skin. It felt a bit better when he chewed on it. But the itch would always come back. He said it was spreading, like he could feel it going over his whole finger. With the lip chewing, I don't know. He gulped down 5 Cokes while we were eating, so I thought maybe it was dehydration.
Raquel decides to take Wallace home. She says Wallace isn't feeling good, and the 2 make their way out of the restaurant. Here's Raquel talking about when they got home.
When we got home, I sat Wallace down on the couch and got him some water. He drank it down pretty quickly, but it was obvious that he wasn't satisfied. He started getting handsy. At the time, I just thought he was sick, you know. I didn't think it was anything major. Maybe some weird virus or something. I'm not a doctor. So I figured, what the hell? If he did have a cold or something, I didn't mind sharing it. We were weird like that. We were fooling around, and he was kissing along my neck when he suddenly just bit me. Not like a kinky bite, like he broke the skin. He probably could have taken it out at my jugular if I didn't hop up. I jumped up all pissed off, calling him a fucking asshole, because who does that, right? I walked to the kitchen, and he starts making these muffled moaning sounds like he was in pain. Turning back, I see him chewing his bottom lip again. But now he was really chewing it. Blood dribbling down his chin. I remember his eyes. Some of those men in black guys that were at the ranch were calling them zombies. But that's not what they were. They didn't really get a good look, 'cause they were all dead when you all got there. You just don't disembowel yourself and live, you know? Wallace's eyes, they weren't some feral animals looking to eat. You could tell he was aware. He knew this was happening to himself. The rational part of his brain gave me a look of panic and pain. That was still him, and he couldn't help himself. He then chewed off his bottom lip. I could see his gums. After that, he bit off his tongue. I tried to put something in his mouth because I thought he was having a seizure or something, but he just started to scratch at me.
Can I see?
The scratches? Yeah.
In the world of developmental and physical disorders, none is stranger than Lesch-Nyhan syndrome. It brings with it a variety of physical ailments, but the defining feature of the condition is behavioral. The sufferer seems to be overtaken with an involuntary, uncontrollable compulsion to destroy themselves and those around them. That's a quote from Lars Sorensen at Rutgers University. Lesch-Nyhan syndrome, I hope I'm saying that right, is a developmental disease that was first discovered in the 60s. It's most common with children as young as 4, but it can develop early with infants as well. It's caused by faulty genes in the X chromosome. You'd think women would be more affected by it than men for having 2 X chromosomes, but that's not really the case. Most of the time, it occurs only in men. I could prattle on and on about enzymes that are affected or what acidic reaction Wallace was having, but I'm not a doctor. I can't really say what the disease was without making myself look like an idiot, because that's not my profession. What I can tell you, though, is that this wasn't the usual disease. Like stated before, this mostly happens in infants, not 20-something war vets. So, it's safe to say that the disorder mutated, and the mutation was a violent one. I can summarize why this mutation is so scary with the following question. You know what the nickname to Lesch-Nyhan syndrome is? Self-cannibalization syndrome.
I still don't get why me, you know? Why I wasn't infected or whatever. You guys have this disease, right? It's like in some secret database of terrible illnesses with anthrax and Ebola. You know that some shit in the environment was what caused the flare-up, right?
Not really at liberty to say.
Yeah, you're sworn to secrecy or whatever. Well, I still don't get it, you know? Why everyone else was eating themselves, and I was spared. Seems almost like divine intervention or something.
Raquel is right. We don't get it either. That's what's scary. I have only a few documents on what is hypothesized as the cause, and they're all just guesses. The mutation was probably spread by environmental conditions, because otherwise we just have no clue how Wallace got it. He wasn't born with the condition. He would have been chewing on his fingers while crawling through the sand in Iraq. This isn't usually a disease you catch. It's something you're born with, and all of a sudden the Lesch-Nyhan syndrome is flaring up in grown adults with deadly consequences. A youngster doesn't have the capacity to understand how to use weapons or silverware. Adults do. Raquel called 911 after Wallace tried to scratch her. While waiting for paramedics and police outside, he got a hold of a kitchen knife and cut himself open, spilling his intestines out. The paramedics were greeted to the sight of Wallace chewing on his own intestinal tubes, tears streaming down his face as he moaned out in muffled pain. It was a terrible sight. I know that just by reading about it. After the shock wore off, the police and Raquel tried to stop Wallace and push his torn guts back in. This disease was not Lesch-Nyhan syndrome any longer, though. This mutation was communicable. This was something else, something much more dangerous than the disease infants were accustomed to. Both paramedics and the 2 police officers who accompanied them became infected as well, and after the CDC was called out, Majestic got involved. The worst scene wasn't at Raquel's home, though. At the restaurant, it was utter hell. Most first responders, both police and medical, became infected when they entered the restaurant, so I don't really have a first-hand account. I do have an agent who was on site, though. There were still a few of the family that were kicking, but barely. You can imagine a restaurant would have a number of sharp objects around. Here's Agent Perry, quote, "When we arrived on the scene, the road had already been closed. A cover story that there was a leak at the nearby nuclear plant was used to ensure nobody would snoop around. When I pulled into the parking lot, the on-site engineers were already boarding up the windows. I could see blood was leading from the front door. It all had a very ominous feeling to it, and those who had been inside refused to enter again. The entrance had a makeshift hatch to quarantine the inside from the outside. I was then escorted into the barbecue restaurant. They had already cut the power to the place, so it had a disturbing, apocalyptic look. Looking around, I saw bodies on top of bodies. Some had forks and knives stabbed into their faces and mouths. Others had attempted to cut themselves open at the stomach. It was a horrendous sight, one which I'll have a hard time forgetting. One that sticks out in my mind is an older couple. Both of them were ruined below the waist, but they were kissing each other. On closer inspection, though, the two weren't kissing. Blood dripped past their mouths to spill between them. One of our newer agents had to step outside to vomit after that. We finished off the few that remained alive, and then torched the whole place." End quote.
The cop was just starting to lose his mind, too, chewing on his tongue. He made a run for his car, grabbing the radio and calling for backup. Or however he said it. His mouth was filled with blood. I knew I couldn't let more people get infected. I didn't want this thing to spread, so I grabbed for the cop's gun.
Go on.
I mean, I know I'm probably going to jail regardless if I admit this or not. You guys already know what happened. You have the forensics, the security footage from... So I don't have to tell you what happened. You know.
Regardless if we know or not, we need to hear it from you.
Alright. Yeah.
Take your time.
Okay. Yeah. I shot the cop. I killed the two paramedics, and then killed Wallace. Is that what you wanted to hear?
You shot them in the head?
Yes.
Did they die instantly?
Yeah. Wallace finally stopped chewing on his guts.
What happened next?
You guys showed up. I heard the helicopters first, and then I saw a few of those biosuit guys walking around the front lawn. I was pretty distraught at that point, so I considered shooting them too.
But you didn't.
No.
Why not?
I don't know. I figured it was enough. You're staring at me.
Apologies.
Look, I guess I come off as a cold person sometimes. I remember back on tour when I had to cut open that tank. People thought I was crazy. I'm not crazy. I just know how to manage my time better.
How do you mean?
My CO thought I was making light of the deaths of a few army men. I wasn't. I was just saving my grief for another time.
Are you saving it now?
Yeah.
After the debriefing, it was determined that Raquel was unfit to return to normal life. She had seen too much. Again, what we do sometimes is quite morally reprehensible, but that's just the way Majestic operates. She was then... Man, I'm doing the outro.
Simon? I was told to come up here and give a change in the announcements. Is that the mic over there?
Yeah.
Good. All staff members who are planning to transfer to Tokyo Black, There has been a small change in the orientation training that Agent Knowles and Frida were scheduled to give. Agent Frida has been called away on some stateside work. In her place, I, Agent Rachel, will be giving orientation in her place. That is all. Sorry, I kind of just took over for a sec. You do the morning report, right?
You look just like...
I look just like who, sir? I heard some of the story you were telling on my way up here, Simon. I'm usually out in the field, so I don't get to hear it all the time. Pretty dark shit, honestly. Aren't these stories supposed to help the people here relax? This seemed like it would put people on edge more than anything. I'm kind of glad I came in and stopped it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Have a nice day, Simon.
Well, that was a little awkward. Lesch-Nyhan syndrome is a real thing. The quote I used from Rutgers University is real as well. I approached this episode with an idea of doing something zombie-like, but we all know zombies are pretty boring at this point. They're in popular culture everywhere, TV, comic books, video games, so this episode was more of a chance to do something different with the idea of cannibalistic monsters. And honestly, what's more scary than real life? Sorry for the delay with this episode. Being a fledgling podcast, I'm trying to get people lined up to do voice work on sometimes inflexible schedules. Delays may be more present in these early episodes, but I'm hoping with schedule and constant updating, we'll learn to get a proper time frame going. Raquel was played by Catherine, a new voice actor that I found on Reddit on our voice actors, I think it was. Anyway, she has done some awesome work, and I'm really glad for her contributions, and expect more of Catherine and Raquel down the line. You can find her demo reel on SoundCloud under the username Carnival-Flux. That's Carnival-Flux. I'll post a link in the episode description. I forgot to mention this last time also, but the agent from the last episode was played by my roommate Michael. He is an artist and web developer, and I'll post his information as well. The episode today was mixed by and edited by Jesse Neiswanger. He's a sound engineer and musician that you can find at jesseneiswanger.com. I'll leave that in the description as well. If you have any comments, suggestions, thoughts on today's episode, please feel free to post something on the site or the YouTube channel, the Twitter, or the Tumblr. You can also email me at the.morning.report.podcast@gmail.com. I'm trying to increase the number of avenues I can be reached at, and, social media is the way to go. So thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time, and that's it. Thank you.